Hello and welcome to Mytech U, the December 2016 edition, where today we're going to be talking about people hacking and how to protect yourself from being the next victim. Now, before I introduce our guest presenter and guest speaker, Zack Schuler, the CEO and founder of Ninjio, I want to say, well, why are we here and why is this important to all those listening? Because we all invest, every business invests in security. We all have business class firewalls for the most part, at least I know all of our customers do, and that's definitely strong recommendations. We have antivirus policies in place, we have web filtering in place, we have a lot of security in place. But the problem is most of us don't invest in educating our staff. And there's studies that show, in fact, one of the data points that according to a Verizon data breach investigation report from that was done in 2015, they looked at this. There was about 80,000 security incidents that were reported in 2014 that were reported. Those are just the ones reported. But of those reported, 90% of them were all due to human error. So you can invest in all kinds of technology security, but if we don't educate our staff, the biggest vulnerability and the biggest problem or the biggest threat we have as businesses and organizations is our people and helping them be aware of the threats that exist. So I'll start there just so we kind of, hopefully I got your attention as far as why this is important and why we're doing this today. So Zack, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we dig into the rest of the presentation?
Sure, Nate. Thanks so much for the introduction. My name is Zack Schuler, the CEO and founder of Ninjio. I came into this business in a little bit of an unusual way. The last 21 years of my life I've spent being very technical, starting off as an Windows NT4 engineer and then working my way up, building a consulting firm, and then selling it. And one of the things that I noticed when I had my company, very similar to Mytech but based on the West Coast, was that I had clients that were continuously getting hacked, and I would go to my security team and say, you know, how is this happening? And the result that I got back was almost always unequivocally, somebody clicked on something stupid. And the reality is, as Nate has described, is that you can put all of the best security appliances in place, the best firewalls, IDS, IPS, managed SIM, you name it. There's a million of these products. You can put them all in place. But if a hacker wants to get at you and you specifically or a specific group, they're going to be able to do it. And so that's when I really came to the realization that the best way to prevent these things is to educate everybody across our country. And so, so that really is what kind of spawned the idea of Ninjio.
Great. So, so Zack will be leading us through the rest of the presentation about Ninjio and about his unique approach to the training. And for those of you that have compliance concerns such as PCI, HIPAA, or FINRA, you know, other ones where security awareness training is part of that checkbox, you know, that's one of the things I know that Zack's program does in a unique way that is hopefully more than just checking that compliance box, but actually effective. So Zack, I'm waiting with bated breath. Take us through it and help us understand the way you came about to the Ninjio program and why it's designed the way it is.
All right, you bet, Nate. Thanks a lot. And thanks everyone out there for attending. So this is our Ninjio logo. Ninjio was basically a play on the word ninja. A ninja is somebody who's very disciplined in their craft. And what we are trying to do is make disciplined computer users out of our customers. So the first thing I want to talk about is and really kind of define is this term called undeniable shifts. We have undeniable shifts that are happening all around us. Probably the most obvious if you live in a major metropolitan area, there's a massive shift going on between taking a taxi and taking an Uber or a Lyft, right? That's just a shift that's happening, and you can't deny that it's happening. It is happening. As it relates to training, undeniable shift number one is that the human attention span has fallen 33% since the year 2000 and is going to continue to do so. Now, if you think about how long humans have been on the planet, and to think that in the last 16 years the attention span has fallen 33%, that's pretty massive. There's an author by the name of Nicholas Carr who wrote a book called What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains, and his hypothesis is that our brains are literally getting rewired, and the primary cause is through social media conditioning. Now, I don't know if you're a Facebook user, but I am, and as I'm going through Facebook, if I see a video up on Facebook that's 7 minutes long, the chances of me watching it are very slim. Whereas if that same video is 3 minutes long, the chances of me watching it are increased. And so we as a society have now started to become trained to only accept very short pieces of content into our lives. And the good news is that Ninjio, we were aware of this happening, and so we've really developed our solution around this. The second undeniable shift is how hackers hack changes every day. I'm going to give you a really scary story, and I'm going to call it actually an evil story that I heard last week. So I'm sure most of you on the call have heard of ransomware before. There's a new variant of ransomware, and it works like this. If you get infected, you pay $792 in Bitcoin, and you will become uninfected. Not a huge number, but it's not inconsequential either. So you either pay the Bitcoin, or the hacker gives you the option of infecting 2 other people, and if you were successful at doing that, you get your computer back for free. And so they've developed kind of the multi-level marketing pyramid scheme of getting ransomware installed on people's computers, and I think it's one of the most evil hacks that I've ever heard of. So hackers are changing their modes every day, and so that once-a-year training that you may have gone through is pretty much pointless, just because of how things change every day, and we are on the cutting edge of the threat landscape as it relates to that. So the status quo, the long PowerPoint presentations, the long lectures, the long videos, it simply, for the most part, just doesn't work any longer. You know, the once-a-year trainings that are out there, it just doesn't work. And so I say, imagine, you know, your users viewed a 4-minute video once a month, and they learned and they retained the information. You become the hero. You've taken out whatever your boring old training is, you've replaced it with this, you are now the hero. If you didn't have anything before, you become the hero, because now you have something that's fun, cool, and unique to watch.
Zach, you know, these are just that sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to throw something out that I think is a pretty common thing that I've heard from our, I think, a statistic around training, but I've also just heard, I get a lot of nods when I talk about this with our customers a lot, which is around the overall retention of most training programs, and typically that retention is about 10%, and that's usually, like, so if you have an hour-long training or a book or a class or whatever, you usually retain about 10%. So part of, I think, what the, you know, if you know, the monthly engagement is that even if it's only 10%, you're at least getting 10% every month as opposed to 10% once a year from a retention perspective. And so I just wanted to throw that out from a, you know, kind of it's a commonly agreed upon stat with regard to training and retention. I just thought I'd throw that out.
Yeah, no, that's a great stat, Nate, and where I think we're probably, you know, a bit ahead of that, because we're doing it every month, and because security awareness starts to become a culture, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. And so these are just some little unsolicited tidbits that I got from clients. The CIO at a company called Dole, they make pineapples and bananas, and I'm sure you've heard of them before. He writes, "Keep up the good work. This is really making a difference." At that particular organization, they had they have an email address, securitythreat@dole.com. Anytime an employee would see a suspicious email, they would forward it to that address. Within 4 months of them implementing Ninjio, the number of suspicious emails reported to that address went up 5 times. He actually said over 5 times, which tells me that we've increased security awareness at that organization by over 500%. There are just a couple of other little things that are bolded and underlined here. They are short and concise videos that are easily consumed. I actually showed my 11-year-old one of our episodes 2 nights ago, our brand new one, and I asked that he repeat back what the lesson was and how it all went down, and he was able to do so. So they really are, you know, pieces of content that are easily consumed by the layperson. The other testimonial here, so much more engaging in the annual essential learning that we have to do. I found myself taking it all in instead of getting distracted by this or that. Getting distracted by this or that is going to be something else that we talk about here in a second. So some of our
one other, sorry to interrupt. One other thing to just, those are some great testimonials. I wanted to do a little research in preparation for this to see kind of like what kind of percentages of reduction can we expect from just doing this kind of training. And according to the National Cybersecurity Alliance, they stated through employee awareness training, you can reduce phishing response rates by 50% and reduce social engineering responses by 75%. So it's basically reducing your staff from responding to those by half or 3/4. So not only to good anecdotal testimonials that you're getting from your existing customers, but also statistically speaking, the National Cybersecurity Alliance agrees with you with some of that data. So
yeah, and what's interesting is that they're looking at all the boring companies that are doing security awareness training. So I would put to you that we would get a better response than that.
That's a great point. That's
so,
a great point.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. So moving on, just want to talk real quickly. Some of our clients, we're a relatively new company. We launched our first episode January of this year, so we've got 12 episodes out. But we've had great traction. Omnicom Media Group, they're 65,000 user organization. We're not in every agency yet, but we're making our way through them. One of the relationships we're really proud of is Kroll. They're a security company themselves. They use our training for their 2,500 employees. InfoArmor's a big reseller of ours, and they use our training for their employees as well, also a very well-regarded security company. In fact, if you read the latest Yahoo breach, I think it was on Forbes or Fortune, InfoArmor is mentioned a ton of times in that breach as being one of the folks that had seen it early on. So now let's talk kind of about the solution, about Ninjio. And when I started Ninjio, we really started with a blank canvas, and that's kind of what the white is supposed to represent here, right? A blank canvas. We didn't look at what the competition was doing. We basically asked the question of this. If I were Joe, the average computer user, and I spent all day in front of my computer answering phone calls and emails, how would I want to be trained? So the first thing that we did is we said, we need to engage Joe. He needs to be engaged, which means he needs to watch, he needs to be interested, and he needs to be learning something. So one of the cool stats that we've got is that we have a 99.2% completion rate in the first sitting. Now what does that mean? It means that 99.2% of our users log in, they start the episode, they watch it, they answer the quiz at the end, and they get their certificate, 99.2% in the first sitting. So 0.8% at some point during that process will bounce out, and then they'll bounce back in. And so I think that's a pretty good stat there. We also have evidence to suggest that our users actually watch the episodes. If you look at the average time to complete, it's less than 5 minutes. And so you don't have users starting the episodes, going off about their day, answering emails or other things, and then coming back to it as the quiz is sitting there waiting for it to be answered, because we're measuring the time in all this. We can tell that people are watching the episodes and answering the quiz immediately thereafter. Therefore, they are not leaving and coming back. And so that's a really big thing, because if anybody out there who's gone through training, if you're like I have been in the past, and I hate to admit it, but you go through the training, you minimize the training, you go do something else, you come back to it later, and at the end of the day, you're really not learning anything when you do that. The second thing that we said that Ninjio has to be is managed. And Nate and his team have a fully managed service around Ninjio, and so essentially it's something that you or IT simply does not have to deal with. It's all managed on their end. The third part is that it's gamified, and we want to even further increase the engagement level by creating a competition among your users. This part's optional. I'll tell you more about this in a couple minutes. At the core of what we do, and this is really the heart of our product, we produce 3 to 4 minute long animated episodes, and we release a brand new one every 30 days. The key there is that your users will never see the same piece of content twice, and every 30 days they will be trained on something different. The magic behind what we do is that we utilize Hollywood storytelling. Our script writer is a guy by the name of Bill Haynes. If you Google him or if you look him up on IMDb, he's also a writer for Hawaii Five-0 and a show you may have heard of called CSI. And so Bill and I have been friends for the past 20 years. I asked him to come on board. He's a minority owner in the business, and so Bill is attached at the hip with us, and he's our writer. And every episode that we do and this is kind of a key from a nonfiction component, we always feature a real company that has actually been breached. And the reason that we do that is we want to draw the user in closer, knowing that the story that they are about to watch is nonfiction. We focus on one real breach, and then we focus on one attack vector. We don't want to get the users confused by talking about a bunch of different concepts. So in that 3 to 4 minutes, we just focus on one single attack vector, like the way that they got in. The second thing that we do from a content perspective, and this helps on the compliance side, is that 2 weeks after we release our episode, we release what we call our anchoring cartoon, which is very simply a 3-pane cartoon that gets embedded into an email, and it reinforces the teachable moment. And so we're just trying to solidify that teachable moment into the user's brain, and that's where I think from a retention standpoint, we're going to crush it. Because now they've seen the video, 2 weeks later they see something else about it. And then the second piece that we release next to the cartoon is a link to our blog. It talks all about how that particular breach happened and what the attack vector was, in this case, spear phishing. Nate, you got any questions going through any of this stuff here?
No, I just think you know, it's the fact that you use real real occurrences is something that actually caught my attention. That you can look it up, right? You can look up these breaches, you can see, and I really appreciate the fact that you're saying how it really happened, and you put some relevant articles around it. That's, because I think sometimes people get lulled into this belief that, oh, it doesn't really happen to me, or that's not really going to happen. But the fact that everything you're highlighting has actually happened to a company to not only increase engagement, but to just make it real for folks. So that's the piece that I've taken away from this that I really appreciate. The only other thing that I would say from again, a data point perspective is actually I looked this up as well, and the organization called PwC, they did a global state of information security survey in 2015, and they actually found that 72% of companies where the security policy was poorly understood had staff-related breaches. Interesting, they made a note that the policies were actually in place in these organizations, but the staff didn't fully understand them. So this is a way also to just reinforce the understanding of the policy by just having some training around it. And again, noting that 72% of those companies had breaches. Again, another interesting data point relative to what we're trying to, the problem we're trying to solve here. So.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you can have a policy in place. It could have been released once. People may have read part of it or all of it, but this is one of those things, because it changes all the time, security, and because you're constantly getting hit with new stuff, that you need to keep yourself refreshed on it literally every other week. And as you're doing that, and as you get good engagement from your employees, you literally create this culture of security awareness where people ask the holy grail question, is somebody trying to trick me? Right? Because that's what most of these things are. They're scam artists trying to trick you. Once they trick you, they become a hacker. And so creating this culture of awareness is not people running around with their antennas up like freaked out at every email that they see, but certainly, as they're going about their day, this is in the back of their mind. And that frequency that we do with the video once a month and then the anchor cartoon every other week, past the video, really anchors kind of security into the brain. I'll talk about one other interesting story that happened. Our first episode was based on USB security and rogue USB devices. We launched that episode for a particular customer. A month after that episode came out, he came back to me unsolicited and said, the weirdest thing happened. We've only released the USB episode, but the number of suspicious emails being reported to us has gone up by 3 times. And so what you're doing is you're just elevating security in somebody's mind, and so they start looking across all of the vectors because they're aware of it. Okay,
Zach,
let's move on.
Before you move on to that, I want to tell one other story around that. Just since you mentioned that story, I actually had one of our customers called us up earlier this month, actually, and they were concerned about a cybersecurity problem, and they said, I want to block anybody sending emails that might look like they're coming from me as the executive, as the owner. And the candid answer is we can't do that. As IT people and technology, we can't block people from faking your name as far as being able to send an email. Now, maybe sometimes spam filters will catch that, but we can't block that. The only way is by increasing the awareness. And we actually had this happen to our company too, where someone contacted, they did some research on us, they found out who our accounting person was, who was in charge of our books, and they actually found out who the executive, our CEO is, Leif Wildenberg, and they did send an email to our accounting person to wire some funds. Now, our accounting person knows our CEO that they wouldn't, that they weren't going to authorize that, and that wouldn't be the way in which we would go about authorizing that. So we had a practice in place to help mitigate, to make sure there was proper internal authorization. But this type of, and that's what had happened to this other customer too, is that they went after the person in charge of the books and who could potentially wire funds. And so it's the only way you can combat that is through awareness. And those are stories that, just have happened, I know, to our customers and have happened to us. But that's one of the biggest risks, because it's just wiring funds or sending funds that to other parties that you're never going to get back. So.
Yeah, at the end of this discussion, yeah, I've got another stat about all of that stuff that's pretty nuts. So, moving on, the last thing that we do is part of our solution, and we hope to almost never do this, is we release emergency announcements, and we have some criteria around that. So if there are a massive amount of people that are being impacted by a particular breach, so in this case, the first Yahoo breach, where they announced that over 500 million credentials have been cracked, there was clear, actionable intelligence behind that, right? If you're a Yahoo user, you go and change your password. Anywhere else where you've used that password, change it there as well. And so what we do is, as soon as we've heard about this breach and we dissect it and we understand it, we'll turn the camera on me. We'll do a less than 2-minute video about exactly what happened and about exactly what you need to go out and do right now, and we release this as soon as possible to get it into your users' brains about the hack that happened, and we try and really kind of tee it up into layman's terms. Again, we hope that these emergency announcements don't ever happen, because it means that something really bad has happened, but that's another kind of piece to the solution there. So let's switch gears just slightly, and we're going to talk a little bit more mechanically about how the solution works and how easy it is to get going. So you are in IT, or you're a business owner, and you're in control of kind of your user list. You are going to, well, Mytech is going to send you a template that all you have to fill out is email address, first name, last name. There's a couple of optional fields like department and supervisor. You take that template, you send it back to Mytech. Mytech uploads that into their cloud-based learning management system. From there, they will send you a user template email that goes out, and basically it's something that you guys will customize to your liking, that basically explains the relationship between Mytech, Ninjio, and your end users, and explains the fact that there's a video that's going to come out every 30 days, followed by the anchor cartoon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's basically just a what to expect next kind of email that we give you the template for. So from there, as promised, episodes come out every 30 days, anchor cartoons 2 weeks thereafter, and your employees are entertained, and best of all, they're educated. There's also a gamification component that I mentioned earlier. What we really encourage your users to do is to consume the content in a timely manner. What we don't want to have happen is for us to release the episode and for the episode to fall to the bottom of the inbox and the user never does it. And so what we do is, if your user consumes the episode within 24 hours, they'll get 2 points in the gamification system. If they consume it within 72 hours, they get 1 point, and after 72 hours, they get a box of tissues. From there are full metrics and reporting based on individual or department, so all of this stuff gets tracked because it is a full-blown learning management system, and so all of these reports are tracked, and I'm going to get into a couple of them now. So the first thing that we do is we release what we call summary reporting This is what I call poor man's reporting, actually, because it's done in Excel, but I really love this report. It gives you an episode summary. So it takes you through all of the episodes that you've been enrolled in, and it shows your percentage engagement. So if you look at episode 1, 100%, that means that this particular company, 100% of the users went through the training, completed the quiz at the end, got their certificate, and were done. You can see that they fell off a little bit in episode 5, 6, and 7, and then brought it back at episode 8. Then here's the leaderboard, and you can see that Susan and Roger and Nicole are crushing it. They all have 18 points. Now, I want to tell you that this leaderboard is private. In other words, only the primary contact at the client has access to this, and whether or not you publish it is up to you. So you can use the gamification system and the points or not. We have some people that don't. We have some people that put so much emphasis on this, they say that if you have a perfect score after 12 months, you get an Amazon Echo. So they're literally putting a $200 reward behind perfect attendance and perfect engagement with Ninjio. If you dive deeper into our reporting, and again, this becomes important for compliance reasons, you can see all the users that have taken the training, when they started, when they completed, how long it took them to take the training, etc. You can look at the bottom 2 users there and see that they have never taken the training. If you focus to the bottom left, you can see that we're in Season 1, Episode 5. Engagement percentage is 94.12%, and average time to complete just under 5 minutes there. The solution is also very mobile friendly. It's written with a responsive front end, so if you've got a user, they're on the exercise bike, they can complete the episode while on a mobile device, which makes it really nice and convenient if you got an extra 4 to 5 minutes to kill and you're sitting somewhere waiting for something. Okay, now getting to the tail end here. So this is our Season 1 release. This has already been out, so you can kind of call these episodes in the library. Every episode represents a month. So just like clockwork, we released our episode the first Tuesday of every month. And you can see all of the attack vectors that we've gone through and then what we've based them on, the stories that we based them on. So we've covered Ashley Madison, Sony Pictures, Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center, which was the ransomware attack, LinkedIn, Anthem. We did one fictional episode on the U.S. presidential elections. We actually released that a week before the election, talked about how the election was going to get hacked. We actually took a fiction episode and it got turned into nonfiction. We also did the latest Yahoo breach, which was on a watering hole attack. So that's our 2016 release schedule. Nate, do you have any questions about any of the stuff here?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is, could you talk about episode 6, the ransomware attack? The reason why is because as a follow-up to this session, we're going to send a link out to everyone, because I know that's an episode that you allowed to kind of allow people to watch as a primer to understand what an episode looks like.
Correct.
So can you tell us a little bit more about that one? So when we do send out that follow-up email tomorrow, that people will have a kind of a framework or perspective around it?
Yeah, you bet. So let's start by talking about the actual breach. So Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center is located in Los Angeles. They had a breach that basically took down the entire network. And at one point there was some confusion in terms of the amount of Bitcoin that they were being asked to provide in order to get their computers back. But their systems were down for quite some time. They ended up settling for $17,000 to get access back to their systems. But in this ransomware attack where all their systems were down, we talk about a story where there's a guy who just got in an accident, a terrible car accident. He's gurneyed into the emergency room. He's a prior patient. They're trying to pull up his blood type, and they can't find it because the computers are locked. And so as a result, the patient ends up passing away. The good news is that this was, in the story, this was all a dream by one of the hospital administrative workers who was about to click on a phishing attempt that would have led to ransomware. And so this is a really good story, because if a computer gets locked up at the exact wrong time, it can have pretty massive complications. And there are actually predictions out there that right now just about every attack has a financial component backed by it. But as we see nation states that start to attack us, you're going to see that attacks move from financial implications to life implications. We will see attacks that will have massive impacts on human life, which is what's really scary and which is kind of the basis behind what I'm doing. So yeah, I would encourage you to watch that episode. It's a really good one. And so yeah, that's what it's about. Any other questions on this stuff here, Nate?
No, I'd say I just have a couple statistics as well to show relative to what you just talked about as far as people clicking on it in particular. And like I said, we'll send that out and that link out tomorrow in the follow-up email that you all will receive. And then there's actually some, according to the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report that I mentioned earlier, 23% of recipients open phishing messages. Again, that's part of what caused this attack on the hospital. 11% click on attachments to those messages, again, so 11% of people, and 50% of recipients open emails and click on phishing links within the first hour of them being sent. So this is the kind of the battle statistically that we're combating. And then they also analyzed 1,000 of those breaches, because if you recall, there was 80,000 breaches reported, security incidents reported in 2014. That's where this data is from. They analyzed 1,000 of those. And the average, the loss of those, the average loss of those ranged from $52,000 to $87,000. So, Zach, I didn't realize that the hospital actually ended up settling for $17,000. So that's actually a lower number than what I would expect for someone like a hospital. But again, when they analyzed 1,000 of those 80,000 records in 2014, it was between $50,000 and $90,000 roughly. So.
Yeah, the hospital one, I think the hackers did a pretty poor negotiating job. They certainly could have gotten more out of them, but then when they realized that they were like a non-profit, small hospital, maybe that's where they caved. We have a really good sheet out there, and it's not on the screen, but if you go to ninjio.com, ninjio.com/ROI, standing for return on investment, we have a bunch of good data there about how investing in security awareness training will actually help you. From an ROI standpoint, we predict a minimum of a 3x ROI by implementing a security awareness program. Not necessarily ours, but it just looks at all the programs across the board and says that there's at least a 3x ROI there. All right,
Zach,
so let's look at season.
I'll include that in the. I'll throw that on the link that we'll send out tomorrow too as a follow-up, just for everyone on the call listening in.
Awesome. All right, so let's do a quick look at season 2. This is what is yet to come, and I like going through these because Nate, you mentioned a few of them already. So our first story in season 2, which we're going to release on January 3rd, is on the Saudi Aramco breach. Very few people have actually heard of that breach. It actually happened in 2012, but we're bringing it back because of the limited number of people that have heard of it, and it has gone down as the most expensive cyber attack in history. And this is where, and I've got a little bit of a typo here in terms of the attack vector. We covered 2 attack vectors that commonly go hand in hand. One is a clean desk policy violation, and the other is badge surfing. And so this is a really good story. We actually got music scoring, and this has all been finished as of yesterday. It's pretty awesome. Nate, I'll actually send you a link to this video. It's pretty good. Then a few weeks, or maybe it was 6 or 8 weeks ago, we had Dyn DNS. They were attacked. Pretty bad, so we have an Internet of Things episode coming up. Nate, you talked about fraud. We have collaborated with the FBI in a particular episode over business email compromise, which is real estate wire fraud. The FBI came to us and basically begged us to do a story about this particular incident. It's an epidemic going on right now whereby an escrow agent will have their email compromised, and just as a homeowner, just a regular old innocent homeowner is about to wire money to the escrow agent, the hacker chimes in and says, hey, wait a minute, we're changing the account, you have to wire it to this account, which, by the way, is a small bank somewhere in Alabama, which then gets laundered and sent somewhere off into overseas. This is an epidemic that's going on right now. Be very careful when doing any wire to make sure you confirm both ends of the wire over the telephone. That's the actionable intelligence there. And then we got a couple of other kind of good episodes coming up as well. And there are no shortage of stories. We get new stories every day. The key is picking the ones that we think are interesting. Nate, any questions on this?
The only thing that I would ask that, because I remember seeing a post that you did on that Ninjio did around wireless and like holiday shopping, and if you're in a coffee shop and using free Wi-Fi. You mentioned something. I didn't see anything on there, but do you have can you expand on that or tell a little story about that? Because I think that's something that a lot of people don't really aren't as aware of what risks can be present in a free Wi-Fi environment, in a public Wi-Fi environment.
So episode 9, season 1, I just backed up a slide, public Wi-Fi security. The really interesting thing about this episode, Nate, was that I learned something. Most of the stuff I know about, but when my writer started really digging in and doing research, what hackers are doing, and they don't even have to be in the location to do this, is they're setting up Wi-Fi access points that look very similar to the access point that you might log into. So, you know, at Pete's Coffee, Pete's, it's a coffee joint on the West Coast. It's spelled P-E-E-T-S. So they might set up a wireless access point that's spelled P-E-T-E-S, right? The way you would normally spell Pete's. And then they get people to log into that. And what they're doing is they're actually harvesting a set of their credentials. So think about this. You create a username and password to log into that Wi-Fi access point, and now that hacker has a set of your credentials. So that's hack number 1. Hack number 2, now all the data that's going back and forth, they can scrape and harvest that data. So they might get additional passwords, they might get banking information, they can get all kinds of stuff. So the moral of the story here, and I've gotten really hardcore when it comes to this, is if you're in a place and there are multiple access points, go up to an employee and say, what is the exact spelling of the access point that you guys have up here? And they will tell you that. The other thing that you can do is look for a posted sign that will also give you the name of the access point. If you aren't 100% sure of the name of the correct access point, do not log into it. It could be really, really bad. And they're setting this stuff up around shopping malls and all kinds of other stuff where hackers are just sitting there scraping information because you've logged into the wrong access point.
Yep.
Any other questions around that?
No, I would say one of the things that I've kind of always suggested, or that I know that I try and keep in mind, is if I do access, where I'm not necessarily having to log in, but if I do access a free public Wi-Fi, I am intentional about not going to any websites to enter my credentials. I'm intentional to not go to my banking site, or intentional about not doing some of these things, because even with that, I remember talking to, I actually heard a presentation from Kevin Mitnick. Those of you who are listening and probably don't know who he is, because I didn't know, but he's a renowned kind of social engineering, people hacking person that got, the traditional path. He was a hacker, was on the most wanted list, got caught, went to prison, now he's a consultant. Seems to be the path that security consultants go sometimes. And he basically demonstrated how you can use a simple thing to even emulate what a real Wi-Fi access point looks like, and make it look even free and make it look very similar. Very similar to what you just described, Zach. But also he mentioned, and I think this is an important point relative to this entire session, is that he gets hired by firms to penetrate their security. And he mentioned something that I thought that I just can't forget, is that when that organization who hires him allows him to use social engineering or people hacking as one of his methods of attack, he has a 100% success rate because of stuff like this. So just raising awareness can help with that. So that was the only last thoughts on that.
And that's a good point. Episode 2 and episode 10 season 1 both deal with social engineering. The first one, getting socially engineered through Facebook, which is really easy to do. And episode 10 talks about getting socially engineered just over the telephone and giving up a password that you shouldn't have. Both great episodes. All right, moving on. Well, that's the preview of season 2, and I am at the end of what I'm talking about. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm hoping that there are questions. We love answering questions. And so, Nate, why don't you talk about the question process real quick?
Yeah, if anyone's got any, I haven't seen any come through throughout the session. But if anybody has some questions, go ahead and use your questions panel on your control panel, the question section there, and I'll either interject them or answer them offline. But let me finish with a couple thoughts and some other points that, again, the problem we're trying to solve and where I hope that we can work together and increase employee awareness around security training. So according to the National Cyber Security Alliance, and by the way, all of these data points and references that we've made throughout this presentation are going to be sent in the follow-up email tomorrow, and there'll be links to all these data points in these articles and these reference points. So if you're interested in those, don't worry, they'll be coming to you tomorrow. But a couple of those data points is that according to the National Cyber Security Alliance, is that 60% of small companies close down within the 6 months following a cyber attack. Especially if there's significant financial compromises or problems. So I don't want any of us to be a statistic. The other thing that they mentioned is that cyber attacks, a lot of times the small and medium business segment is they feel like they're too small to be an attack vector or targeted. But actually they found that in I think this was forgive me, I can't remember if this is 2015 data or 2014 data, but they found that, actually in the last 5 years, from 2011 to 2015, cyber attacks aimed at small companies have doubled. So
yeah, hey Nate.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nate, if I can chime in on that, the reason that they've doubled is because the hackers have figured out that the medium enterprises and larger have dedicated CISOs. They have a hardcore focus on security from top to bottom, and so they say, well, shoot, what's going to be easier to penetrate? One of those guys, or the upper end of the small business, where there still is money. You can still take a 50-user company, and you can still get them to wire $150,000 out of the company, and because they have no security protocols, they don't have policies, they don't have any of this stuff, and so the hackers have finally gotten smart and said, man, it's just easier to go after the small business, so that's what we're going to do.
So that's a perfect segue to the last bullet point that I was going to say around that. That according, again, the National Cybersecurity Alliance, as they were specifically, and again, one of these things is they actually have some framework and some data, a lot of reading that you can do if you want. But the point that I thought as I was scrolling through some of this information that I thought was really interesting is that they have 4 recommendations for what small businesses can do to help protect themselves. There's make sure you're doing your updates, make sure you have a good, strong policy, password policy, make sure you have good policies in place. And one of the 4 things that they recommend that you do to prevent these kind of attacks is educate your employees. So one of the 4 things that they're recommending. This is the Cyber, Security Alliance is saying that just train your staff and educate them. So. I thought when I was going and doing that data, I thought that was kind of a fascinating piece because most of the time you just hear about the technology and the technology and the technology, but they're calling out that it's about education. That's really important. So, Well, with that said, we're at the end of our time. I got a comment, but not a question online, so thank you very much. This is recorded, and it will be available on our website. So the email that you're going to get tomorrow has all these links. We'll have a link to the episode. That we referenced earlier, as well as a link to the recording that you can forward on to folks if that makes sense. So, and if you have any questions, Zach, if you go to the next slide, real quick, if you have any questions or follow-up, just go ahead and send me an email. I've got my email there, and I want to thank Zach for joining us and sharing his wisdom and knowledge about Ninjio and the problem we're trying to solve here. So, thank you, Zach.
Thank you, Nate.
All right, have a great day, everyone.
All right, bye-bye.